Hi, everyone. I'm Amber Masso, the Director of Communications and Alumni Engagement for the Terry Foundation. I'm excited to be joined today by another one of our alumni for a Terry in 30 chat. So I'll let him introduce himself.
Great. Well, thanks, Amber. My name is Landon Cowan. I am a 2013 UNT traditional scholar. I originally grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and got my undergraduate degree in applied behavior analysis at UNT. I also got another bachelor's degree in Spanish there, but don't call me on that one because I'm not using it well. I did my master's in behavior analysis at the University of Houston Clear Lake, so right next to NASA. And now I just graduated from my master's program, and I am now in my first year of my PhD in psychology/behavior analysis at Marquette University up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay, so I really appreciate you taking the time to have a Terry in 30 chat with me today. Why did you want to make this recording? Like, what are you hoping that people get out of our chat today?
My field of applied behavior analysis is just not very well known. And so I think this is a great opportunity to kind of share something brand new to people, as well as kind of give them the idea that you can find new opportunities where you're not necessarily looking for them or that you don't know are there, just in an instant, which is definitely how I found my field. And so I think if anything, walking away with an appreciation for those new opportunities and that open-mindedness that is necessary to encounter them. And also just hearing about a really cool field that is making a lot of impacts on society that people may not be aware of.
That's awesome. Okay, so if you had to describe that major, this field of study, to a freshman or somebody who's trying to make a decision, how would you describe it to them?
Yeah, so I think this is one of my favorite tasks because it's a very hard field to summarize. I think because it's so new, like what do you tell people? But I think the best way to describe it is behavior analysis, and specifically, I'm an applied behavior analyst. We are a field that focuses on the analysis of human or non-human animal behavior and its interactions with the environment around it. And the environment constitutes everything from the room you're in, the people interacting around you, and even your own internal thoughts and feelings and experiences. So we analyze these environmental variables and we find parallels or connections between what's going on in your environment and why you're behaving the way you are. And from this, we then design interventions or policy changes at all different levels to improve the quality of life for people who are experiencing impacts of disabilities or wanting to, improve their health and nutrition, or, even bigger societal problems like recycling, climate change. All of these things can be tackled from this analysis of the environment and our behavior.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I had absolutely no idea what the field was itself. So what does a typical day look like for a behavior analyst then?
Yeah, so I think this is very idiosyncratic to the behavior analyst, but I think what you'll find, most people who call themselves an applied behavior analyst specifically are folks that are working primarily with people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. This isn't something super specific to our field of we were created just to serve individuals with disabilities, but it's something that we are well suited for, and there's a lot of demand for and funding, both at the federal and state level, for services for these individuals. And so what most people in my position do are we will consult with families, with schools, other third parties on particular individuals who may be experiencing problematic behaviors that are impeding their learning or their safety. And we will work with that consumer to design interventions that are meant to address and help improve that quality of life for the individual and those around them. And so what my work particularly looks like is I'm less focusing on severe problem behaviors that might emerge. And I'm working with folks who our main goal is teaching them brand new skills, like academics, basic academics or pre-academic skills, such as learning to attend to materials, learning to sit and listen to someone. So our day-to-day is quite messy in a lot of ways. You know, we're getting hands-on with a variety of individuals across the age span. We're also meeting with our teams to discuss changes to these interventions or what improvements might need to be made. And one of the favorite things of any behavior analyst is graphing. We do lots of graphing because this is how we interpret whether our interventions are working or not. Is we, will make visual representations of the data to make sure that we're on the right track. And then we use these data to show our stakeholders, show our consumers that our interventions are either working or not working in order to proceed to the next steps. So it's a summarized version, I guess, of our day-to-day. It could be a lot of things. And I think one of the exciting things for people who are interested in this field, but maybe aren't as interested in working with folks with disabilities, for one, maybe you have a different interest, whether it's business or health or sports and fitness. We have folks in this industry that are working in all of those domains because, again, behavior is behavior. So we have people, Aubrey Daniels, he is commonly recruited amongst the Fortune 500 companies. He's worked with, billion-dollar corporations, just helping them improve the experience and performance of their employees. Just coming up with workplace systems to encourage productivity, to encourage people to be safe in coal mines or on factory floors. Like, how do we keep people safe, happy, and productive? Those are questions we can answer too. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's, I guess, working in nonprofits too, it's been really interesting for me over the last 12, 15 years to watch the fundraising discussions that take place.
Yeah.
And I obviously am a little bitty baby in this field compared to people who've been in it much longer. And I don't even really work in fundraising right now at the foundation. But I just remember at one point when I was working for a cancer nonprofit, and we were at this conference discussing donor stewardship and just building and maintaining relationships, but it was related to designing your actual solicitation pieces. And we had a neuroscientist basically present to the group about the ways that people's brains fire differently for different messaging, for the relationship to images, to the relationship to an individual story versus talking about a vast population and how something might feel like a statistic rather than an individual pull or call for help. And I remember talking to a lot of people that were there who were just fascinated by the idea that there was science being infused into this thing that they'd been doing forever. And I guess for me, being fairly new and also having studied biology up until right before I graduated, I was like, no, that makes perfect sense, especially if you're really trying to understand your audience. Why wouldn't you take a scientific approach? So
absolutely.
So even for somebody who's, looking at the field that you're in, not just thinking about it from a clinical perspective, but the fact that there are applications to looking at human behavior and looking at it in terms of marketing, organizational development, like you said, the reach is just very broad, as long as you know that it's there to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think related to that, it's one of the most interesting and kind of bizarre when you first think about it, but it makes sense after a while. One of the most interesting people in our field right now, his name's Ron Van Houten. He's a professor at Western Michigan University, just a short ways away from me. And he has basically made a career on working on health and safety around transportation. So he is, when you're true story, if you go outside and look right now and you see a pedestrian yield sign or different signage around stopping for pedestrians, roadway signals, like alerting you that there's an intersection ahead. Those have all been influenced by his work. He actually brings in millions of dollars through working with the Department of Transportation at the federal level. Like he's the guy who has like helped influence like tons of traffic laws and safety procedures. And it's weird because you would never know because he's a very like chill and quirky dude, but he originally worked with people with disabilities and whatnot, but one day like stumbled into this whole world of like traffic safety, and now that's where he gets almost all of his funding. And he produces students that are now going on to like government level roles, working with police departments and cities to help influence their traffic safety. It's crazy, but it's there.
I guess most people would probably think that it was like the work that like engineers or somebody was doing
Yeah.
because it has to do with design. That's fascinating.
Yeah. One of one example of a study he was responsible for was figuring out like how to get people to actually stop at a crosswalk when pedestrians were coming, because you're supposed to yield for pedestrians. And what
In
he
theory.
did, in theory, you're supposed to. In Houston, I remember living in
Yeah.
Houston. No, that didn't happen. Milwaukee, it doesn't really happen either. But he was tasked with figuring out like where could he place signs reminding people to yield, like how far away did these signs need to be from the actual crosswalk to get people to actually slow down. And so he set up also across weeks in Michigan, he would at different intersections, he would set up these cameras to watch people yielding or not yielding, as was also the outcome, and found out that traffic signs or any kind of posting needed to be, I think it was like 20 feet away or 20 yards away from the actual intersection for them to be effective. If they were like right on the intersection, might as well have not been there. So it's interesting. It's like all of these different questions that have like slowly but surely like impacted like traffic safety in weird ways. But yeah, you would think it's some engineer, but that was a behavior
really
analyst. Cool. No, tons of psychologists across the disciplines. It's crazy. Like, there is a huge push or a huge field within psychology of people related to advertising and like product placement, like how do ads work on Facebook and Instagram? Like how do those influence our purchasing or consumer habits? It's a crazy science.
Yeah. And something that I think
So
a lot of students probably don't consider, again, when they're going back and looking at their course catalog, trying to say, well, I'm interested in psychology, but where is it going to take me? Or does the degree mean I'm only going to be in a clinical setting? Like what are the other applications for it? And I think being able to encourage ourselves to think broadly about the fact that there's so much overlap and interconnectedness between a lot of the things that we study, and you don't have to keep yourself in this narrow lane.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's really cool.
I think it's like as you said, like it's all about like, getting creative and following your passions. Like find a way to apply the work you're doing. One of my friends, her thesis down in and when I was in Houston was training police officers how to respond to individuals with autism if they got a call to respond to someone, having a crisis in public. And like what a cool project to be able to like suddenly like make all of these inroads with the Houston Police Department. And now her work is cited with Houston PD, and she's looking forward to working with future law enforcement officers in the future. And like what a cool way. Like I don't think she expected that to be the case of when she first started in this field, but here she is. Like she is now getting calls from different law enforcement offices that want her training. It's crazy.
So you're currently working on your PhD. Sort of along your journey, what would you say have been a couple of just the most impactful experiences for you personally on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first one that I always come back to is when I first found behavior analysis through the Terry program. And that helped me get connected with my eventual undergraduate research mentor. And through this process, I really got to see the benefits of conducting research in addition to the clinical services. I think anyone who's in this field will agree that working with our consumers, with our clients, is one of the most rewarding parts of the job. And what I really enjoyed, in addition to that, was also being able to ask research questions about our services, our trainings, to both the consumer, but also to the other staff that are working with them. It's great if you can design an intervention, but you also have to be able to train the staff to implement that intervention. So to me, that was a big click or light bulb in the head, if you will, for me, that I saw myself as a researcher, and I wanted to pursue all things research in addition to, serving folks with different needs. And that led me on this path to where I eventually came down to the University of Houston Clear Lake for my master's degree, where I, again, just like renewed my love for both research and services. And that formed me into the person I am truly today, in that it prepared me for my doctoral program. And so I think I've been very fortunate to encounter a lot of amazing behavior analysts and amazing researchers, and also just incredible human beings who truly go in and day out to make the world a better place. And I think we all need a little bit of that nowadays. It's just kind of like that hope to see in the world. Things can be quite dark, and I think this field has really like increased my optimism about the future. And so I think every day is kind of its own rewarding bright spot, if you will. So yeah.
So in terms of, having your optimism for the future just continuously being, reinforced, what are some words of wisdom that you would give to fellow Terry scholars who are possibly either considering this field specifically or just still trying to figure out where their passion lies?
Yeah, I think that's the whole goal. I hope that people are trying to like figure out in their undergraduate and post college careers, because you may not find it in your career and in your undergraduate institution. And I know many people in my field, behavior analysis, that didn't find it until they were much more removed from school. So if you haven't figured it out, don't worry. I think one of the biggest things is utilizing your Terry network that you have pre-built in to your whole career. And I think also just being open to a lot of offhand suggestions or experiences that might be offered to you at your places of work or school. Because that's how I ended up here. I took an offhand suggestion to go look into this field, and now I'm getting a PhD in it. And while I don't think that is the model success story for every single person, that's definitely not the template of what everyone needs to do. I think it speaks to what can happen if you open yourself up to these possibilities, especially if you are uncertain of what you might want to do. And I know one thing for me was there's some choice paralysis with that, right? Like when you're at school, there are 1,000 different options or avenues that you can go down or people you can talk to. But hopefully in that situation, you push yourself forward and not be overwhelmed by the choices, and utilize those choices while you have them. Because once you leave school, those choices kind of start to trickle away because they're not right in front of you like they are at a university. So I hope those in school, I hope you just use the resources that are there and can try to dig into what options might be out there that you don't know exist at that time, because you may discover something the next day that completely revolutionizes your career trajectory.
I think that's such an important point to make. And what you said about just like allowing those offhand opportunities to not just be placed in front of you, but allow yourself to experience them. it's so easy to stick with the plan. And again, the plan we make for ourselves, we make it with such limited information, which may have felt like the best information at the time we received it, but in most cases, it's definitely not all that's out there. And
Yeah.
it's really easy to, I think, feel like you're being distracted from the goal, particularly if you haven't had anything modeled for you before, because you're the first in your
Absolutely.
family to go to college, or you feel this pressure, particularly students on a scholarship, like you feel this pressure not to waste the opportunity or to make it seem like you're indecisive, when really, especially with this scholarship, that's the whole point, is what pressure can we remove on the financial side to allow you to discover um, your best self and the way that you can make the impact the most, and give you the freedom to take some of those chances and kind of go down those unexplored paths that some people just literally feel like they're stuck and they can't do that because
Yes.
budget, because expectations, because a whole number of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so true. I think, I just reflect all the time. And anytime anyone asks me like my story, like outside of the Terry Foundation, when anyone asks me like, how did you get into this field? Because I think that's always an interesting story to ask someone in this field, is like, how'd you get in? And so we ask it a lot. And I think for me, the Terry Foundation is the first thing I mention in that, because without it, I may have found behavior analysis. I might have stumbled upon it eventually, but because of the Terry Foundation, I had this very easy and like gentle push, like to go explore this new field. And there wasn't pressure on me to think, oh my God, I might be wasting my time exploring this new field. Like, am I going to get a job in it? Am I going to, is it going to result in anything? Am I going to love it? Am I going to be sticking with it in 2 years' time? And so, because those pressures were removed from me, thanks to the foundation, I was able to just jump right in and start encountering all the opportunities that this major had to offer.
Okay, so I have a question I thought of while you were explaining earlier about what exactly the field entails. How has
Yeah.
it changed the way that you perceive your environment, like the environments that you're in, and your reaction to them, knowing that that's what you study?
Oh my God. It really revolutionizes everything. I think my worldview has changed year to year since beginning this field, and it's slowly like shifted my views from like offhand comments that we all make all the time, right? Like, why would they do that? Oh, they're just a mean person. Oh, they're right. Like, sorry to be like blunt with it, but like they're an asshole, right?
Mm.
Like, right. Like, oh, they're just that way because they are. And so I think what this whole process has showed me is reinforcing the idea like we are products of our environments, and we're products of the conditions that we live in. And we saw violent actions in Washington D.C., and we've seen different versions of protests all summer through the Black Lives Matter movement, and throughout the entire really existence of all of us, right? Like there's always something going on where like there's some sort of protest or movement. And it's very easy to write off, especially when you're on the other side of something, right? Like, oh, they're just mean, like they don't care. But I think what it's reflected to me is there's something influencing all of this, like all of this behavior we're seeing. We're seeing this anger for some reason, and it may not be a great or like a beneficial reason, but there's something going on there that is like influencing this. And so like when we look at like the types of folks that might have spoken up or acted in some way that's terrifying to a lot of us, we have to see like what was going on around them. And we might see, oh well, they were living in a secluded community without a lot of outside resources, where they were being fed this over and over again. And like all of the people around them were modeling this verbal behavior, this thinking of, oh, the world is this way, there is no other way. And so, of course, they're going to start thinking that, right? Unless they have other views in their life, they're going to start, regurgitating the same things or believing the same things. And so, I think it's taught me to have a lot of grace for people that I disagree with, because it's very easy when you first meet someone that has a wholly different view than you to say, wow, how in the world did they get there? Like, why in the world did they believe something like that? And it allows me to take a step back and say, no, there's a reason that they're saying that. There's a real reason. It's not great that they're saying these things, but there's a reason. And if we want to change society for the better, if we want to like overcome some of these social inequalities, racial injustices, or acts of violence, like we need to not just wag our finger and say, wow, they suck for believing this. We also need to, try to go at it and roll up our sleeves and say, what are the conditions that we can change that might be influencing this, and try to like make the world a better place. And, try to remember, like, it's not this person, like, it's not just this person, it's a certain environment, like, and we can change the environment that future generations come up in. So it leaves me hopeful, and it also fills me with this reminder to try to have some grace for people that think differently than me, because at the end of the day, we're products of our environment, and we're going to be led in the direction of our environment, but we also have the power to change those environments.
That's great. Yeah, it's a great way of looking at it. So, the whole point of our discussion was to make sure that you were able to share information about your field that people probably didn't know before. So, what else would you like people to know about, what it is that you do?
I think, yeah, wow. I think one thing I think is it just rings true to me is just like, think about where you came from. I think, think about where you came from and what made you you. And we have a lot to be thankful for in this foundation. And I think it's led me to a certain position now where I'm investigating this field, and where it's led me now is trying to like understand the way, right? Like, we all want to understand the way that the world works, but I am thrilled in a sense, because like I have discovered this field that allows me to provide a lot of like direct good to the consumers I work with, the families and the schools. I get to benefit them directly by helping them make small changes that are incredibly impactful to those families for their future and their health. But it's also provided me a worldview of how to shape and think about the world in a way that is hopeful, and that we can enact change on this world. And I think the funny thing about behavior analysis is people kind of ask, like, which realm do you work in? Like, what is your direct client population? And it seems kind of like weird to argue like, well, we're kind of everywhere. But the thing is, behavior is everywhere. And while a lot of people end up working with people with disabilities or some sort of related profession like that, educators, what have you, we have people who are on the forefront of, HIV and AIDS research, of how do we, reduce the prevalence of HIV and AIDS in society? How do we, encourage people to consistently stick to medications? If we have someone who is suffering from an addiction, how do we help them to be less likely to relapse? How do we prevent overdoses from happening? All of these different questions that seem very removed from working with someone with autism, right? Which is what I do day to day. But it's the same underlying philosophy and the principles that we apply to every situation. And I think that's really exciting, that we can apply the same philosophy to tackle problems at all different levels, whether it's at the individual or the world, this is, or a culture, a society. And I think um, I don't know, that just excites me in a way that I could talk about for hours, and talk about all the different ways that, we could make meaningful changes. And I hope that inspires people to think big picture about the work that they're doing, and think about what, day to day, here's what you're doing, but also what does your work mean for the world at large, the future of the future generations.
How does it fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So for somebody to do the work that you're doing, to
Mhm.
practice in this field, what does that education path look like exactly?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are a lot of avenues into this field. In terms of, if you wanted to actually practice, I am a board certified behavior analyst, or a BCBA. That credential is important because that is now recognized as a required credential in order to practice with individuals with autism or other related disabilities for health insurance or some sort of state or federal funding. So if you're really interested in that type of work, what you'll need to pursue is, of course, both an undergraduate training that maybe is applied behavior analysis, but maybe not. It could be a lot of different undergraduate trainings. Maybe try to stick to something that's somewhat similar. Although I have a friend who recently graduated with me, his undergraduate work was in mathematics, and now he's a board certified behavior analyst too. And so everyone's path in this field is different. But in terms of, a long-term career, most people operate in the field with a master's level degree in order to attain that board certification, which is what I had. I had to complete my master's coursework in addition to practicum or some supervised field work. So the coursework and the field work go together in order for you to be able to sit for this exam. And so that's the general trajectory. I am continuing beyond my board certification to reach my PhD degree, but that's not required for this field. There's a very small number of PhDs in our field, and most of them are getting that degree for research purposes. They're not doing it to become a clinical director or some sort of higher level administration in some sort of service provision model. The master's level is the primary target in our field, and there are programs popping up every day across the country, both online and in person. So I was fortunate at UNT. UNT actually had the first master's program in applied behavior analysis. Started back in 19. Oh, I don't even want to say it. I'm scared. I know I'll be wrong. It was back in the 70s or 80s, I believe.
So not that,
But
relatively not that long ago.
not that long. I mean, the founder of our field, B.F. Skinner, he is commonly thought of as the father of behavior analysis and the experimental analysis of behavior. He was publishing and working on his seminal pieces in the 40s and 50s. That's when he was doing most of his work. And the field of applied behavior analysis really started in the late 60s. So we're talking about it seems like decades ago, but really in terms of like a profession, a vocation, that is no time at all. And we're still very much in the infancy of this field, but it's rapidly expanding.
Cool. So, okay, knowing what you know and having the training that you do, are there ever any times when looking at things that are happening around you that you wish you didn't know as much as you do?
I think a lot of it, what makes me mad the most or devastated is when I want to just provide an excuse for my own behavior. I think that is one of them. Or like what gets me in trouble with my partner is like, I'll call him out on something, or he'll call me out on something, and I can tell you why I did it. So I think sometimes ignorance can be bliss, right? Of like, why do we? It's easy. It's fun or useful sometimes, right? To just be able to be like, oh, I just did it, whatever. Like I just wanted to do it, but I'm burdened with the knowledge of I can actually break down a likely reason why I did it or why he did it. And so
Mhm.
um, that's not always well received.
Mhm.
So you know what? It's not always well received by me either when I
Right.
explain it to myself. So,
And it
yeah.
makes it hard to be mad for the sake of being mad sometimes, I guess.
Yes. Absolutely. So oftentimes when I, I try to keep my worldview with me at all times, but there's certain times at night when I'm just sitting on the couch and I'm just like, I don't want to think about this. I just want pizza. Like I just want pizza right now. I don't want to think about why I want pizza. No, I just, darn it, just give me that pizza. I don't care why.
Um, well, just again, thanks, I think, for taking the time to really explain what it is that you do and why it's important and why it's like ever present in pretty much every aspect of our lives. We just weren't aware of it. So I think it's
Yeah.
really cool for Terry's to kind of really start again re-examining just what their options are. So I think it's an awesome opportunity they have to hear from somebody who may be doing something that they just didn't even know existed.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for the platform to be able to do it. I think what I hope people take away from this is being able to like, share and give you the opportunity to think about like what are the possibilities that I don't even know exist yet, versus me just standing on an island like, hey, notice me, I'm over here. Like, hey, we're over here, we got something cool.
Right.
That's a whole nother case. But yeah, I just I'm hopeful that people can take something away from this, even if behavior analysis isn't in their future. Behavior is a part of your future,
Mm,
and I think learning about the mechanisms that guide our behavior and thinking about how your environment influences your behavior, I think can be a really useful exercise for whatever career you're going into. So
mhm.
think about the possibilities that provides to you. It's
Just for
cool.
general mindfulness and self-reflection too, which I think
Yes.
everybody can benefit from.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right, great. Well, thanks again for offering to do your Terry in 30.
I'm so happy to do it. Thank you.